All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this show on the road. My name is Dino Pick. I'm the city manager of the city of Delray Oaks. I want to welcome you all to the public workshop on CCA. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight for a very important issue and a very complex issue. I'd like to introduce, well, first before we start, there is a sign-in sheet making the rounds. Please make sure you sign in so we know who was with us tonight. While that's making the rounds, let me introduce some distinguished guests we have with us tonight. In addition to our city attorney, Alex Lorca, we've got the two ladies that keep this machine going day to day up here with me, Kim Carvalho and Karen Minami. In addition, we've got Chief Hoyne, Commander Berkwin, and Corporal Ewan here with us from PD. Council member and Vice Mayor Kristen Clark is with us. Thank you for being here. And then we have our speakers that have come from near and far to participate in the workshop tonight. I'll start with by introducing the team that's here from Monterey Bay Community Power. We've got their CEO, Tom Habashi. Tom, thanks for being here. In addition to Tom, his team, we've got JR and Mark, both here. Thank you both for coming. We've got Dennis Vermette from Pilot Power here. Thank you for coming, Dennis. John Gagliotti, one of our own, not so far away, is going to present on energy markets. And then we have Jim Phelps here, who is going to provide us sort of an independent analysis and a critical look at CCA's pros and cons. So, Jim, thanks for coming and joining us. All right. Next slide, please. Okay, so rules of the road. Nothing new here for those of you that have participated in other workshops, whether it's short-term rentals or traffic calming. Please be respectful of each other's time. What we'll do tonight is we'll move through presentations by the individuals that I just introduced. That will probably take the better part of an hour. And at that point, we'll move into public comment and Q&A stage for the second hour. And we'll have the folks that presented sit up here, and we'll manage public comment. I'll manage public comment and Q&A. If you have a question or a comment, please come up to the microphone and speak. If you have a comment, limit it to 2 minutes. And if you have a question, ask it away, and then we'll service it to the person that can best answer it. Give everyone a chance to speak once before you come up and speak again. And I'll try to move us through as quickly as we can so everybody gets to speak what's on their mind. Each comment has merit. It deserves to be heard. Pure and simple. Please be respectful. No rude interruptions. As I said, you can either raise your hand and ask a question from your seat, or you can come up and make a public comment here from the microphone. Let's keep it positive. I mean, there's a lot of passion around these issues, Lord knows, but let's keep it positive and constructive all around. Slide. Just want to go over the city priorities. You know, what are we looking to accomplish here? And these are the priorities that staff has developed for council to review and consider. But here they are. We seek to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We seek to provide our ratepayers in the city of Delray Oaks with competitive pricing for their power and reduce that cost. We seek to derive a revenue stream for the city to fund other energy programs. And ultimately, and always, we seek to mitigate the risk to the city. Slide. Okay, so with that as sort of introduction, I'd like to invite our first speaker, which will be John Gagliotti. John, if you want to come on up.
Yeah.
Take it away. We've given each speaker about 10 minutes to present, and with the exception of Jim Phelps, who's going to take longer because we've asked him to cover a lot of ground. So, John, thanks.
Okay. So
I'm sorry, before we start, just one caveat. Please hold your questions to the end. There's going to be a lot of ground we're going to cover. Take notes. Your questions are important, but we'll take them at the end, and that way we'll segue right into public comment and Q&A. Okay? Thanks.
First, to start off, the purpose of this presentation is really just language. The energy markets are not a complex thing, but they're very highly specialized, and there's a lot of language. And I'm hoping, the hope is that if I go through all of this with all of us in here, then we'll have pictures in our minds of some of the terms that would be used, and then we can have a very real and detailed discussion with the LSEs, the load-serving entities that are in the room, Monterey Power, Pilot Power, and we won't get kind of maybe caught up in some of the rudimentary understanding. Okay, so starting with some brief history, back when we first electrified the United States, a group would get together. They would build a generator, transmission lines, and distribution lines. They would next to a load center, and all the residents of that community would become customers. This was a very passive customer relationship. There was no negotiation for price. Customers just paid for electricity for the electricity they used. There was also no opportunity to buy different products. But it was the first electrification. Next, actually, you don't have to change that. In the 80s and in the 90s, the energy markets deregulated. And what they did this largely as a way to better utilize existing assets that they have out there, transmission assets. So it made sense that if you had a congestion in your service area, and your local or your neighboring utility next to you had transmission lines that you could port power out to and then bring it back in, that was a much more efficient use of existing resources than building your own new transmission line. But what this did is that it brought in a whole paradigm shift. It turned transmission from a hard asset that you had to build to a service, to a commodity, to something that you could just pay for if you needed it. Likewise, if that local utility had a generator that generated power cheaper than you did at your local generator to your customers, you could buy power from that generator, ship it to you, and then sell that to your customers either at a discount or take that margin. So it did two things. It was a game changer. It decoupled the ownership of generation and transmission ownership, and it introduced this opportunity for independent power producers, IPPs, to come in. No longer did the utility have to be the only generator. Others could then come in, and independents could come in and build generators and sell it to the market. And it decoupled the energy transaction, so from the actual local generator. In the hub and spoke model, customers paid the retail rate based on what it cost to build that, to generate electricity out of that local generator. Now, multiple load-serving entities could go out and put products together and and go to multiple generators and put a product together and sell it to a customer. And so we moved from a hub and spoke model to more something like this: a pool, just a pool of electrons where you have a generator, an IPP, and then a load-serving entity taking out of it. All right, so then the next thing, in order for this to happen, you also then needed a management structure. And so the idea of an independent service operator, or an ISO, came up. And what they do is they manage all of the assets that are out on the grid. They are the grid, but they don't own anything. And in California, we have the Cal ISO. And the five major tasks, or the major responsibilities that the ISO provides is reliability. 5 nines, 99.99% reliability. They balance the instantaneous supply and demand that's out there. They do the transmission planning, and they ensure that all these participating load service entities, the LSEs, have adequate resources in order to meet their customer load. And they also establish the power market. Okay? So this is now from the hub and spoke model, this is now the market environment that we all live in today. California. We have multiple IPPs selling wholesale power into the Cal ISO, and we have multiple LSEs, ever more increasing, buying power at a wholesale rate and retailing it out to their customers. The important point is that PG&E, the deregulated side of PG&E, Monterey Bay Community Power, and Pilot Power are all LSEs, and they are all buying power from the same pool. Okay? All right. Now, first I want to take a stop. We're all good on the market kind of structure. Okay, so now we're going to go into the next level. And this is the types of generation, and this is load. So every LSE, load serving entity, is responsible for providing an adequate amount of resources to meet the load profile of their customers. And this is a typical load profile. Load is segmented in basically roughly in two categories, or two components. There's base load, and then there's peak. Examples of base load are, it's power that's not turned on or off, it's just there. It's just refrigerators, it's the green lights and everything in there. It's just power that's just there. It's street lights at night, and signals, that sort of thing. Peak power, by contrast, is power that's turned on and off quickly. And it has diurnal impacts, meaning that there's time, a time component. So time of day, environment, calendar, it changes. And it's dynamic. But you need multiple, or you need different types of generators to meet different types of load. Generators are broken into are roughly into two categories, and this is from the point of the managers, of the grid managers. They're either conventional resources, this is Moss Landing, or they're renewable resources. That's the way the Cal ISO looks at generators. Within generators, on the conventional side, the managers then also add value to certain generators by how dispatchable they are, how quickly they can turn it on. In the conventional side, gas turbines, which are jet engines, can be turned on in 5 minutes, spool up, and you're generating power. They are very fast in their dispatchability. They're relatively cheap to build, but they're inefficient and expensive to operate. And they have really high emissions. Generators like coal, combined cycle natural gas, nuclear, and large hydro, they are relatively expensive to build, but relatively cheap to operate. And they are dispatchable. You can ramp them up and ramp them down, but you don't turn these generators off. You turn these things on, they get them going, and they're running. And their emissions it's basically kind of graded like this. Hydro and nuclear do not have emissions. Combined cycle natural gas and coal have emissions, coal being the worst. And actually the worst would be oil. We don't have any oil in our mix here in California. Then, by contrast, renewables are generally expensive to build, but generally inexpensive to operate. There's no fuel costs. There's zero emissions, which is their biggest benefit, but they are completely non-dispatchable. They must be firmed up with some sort of natural gas or some sort of conventional resource, and generally it's gas turbine. Okay? The reason that we went through all of that was basically to give you a description of how or what kind of generation is then brought to bear to manage the load profile. So in the peak, we generally use gas turbine. In the base load, we use these slow dispatchable resources like nuclear or renewables or combined cycle natural gas. But the big point here is that this whole calculus, everything here, the load serving entity is responsible for procuring all of the adequate resources in order to meet that load profile of their customers. And that is called resource adequacy. And that's an important point. Okay? So, resource adequacy is, let me say this. It is 100% legally and contractually correct for a load-serving entity to say that they supply 100% green power. They can go out to the market and they can buy capacity from an IPP, and I used to be an IPP, from a wholesale renewable energy, and they can market that capacity back in the form of a product to their customers at that rate of what it costs them. They can buy it wholesale and they can retail it out, and that is absolutely legally and contractually correct. But that doesn't mean that a load-serving entity is 100% green. That doesn't mean all the power they buy is green, because they still have a resource adequacy component. They still have to provide resource adequacy. And the reason that I bring this point up is that this is important, is that we are moving from that passive customer relationship where we just get what we just pay for what we get. Now we're out and there's a choice. Now we're out, we as customers need to understand where our power is coming from, or what it is that we're buying, okay? So understanding what resource adequacy is and understanding what is being sold is an important point. And then what I want to say about this is that so what a customer does that utilizes, that buys 100% green power, is that every kilowatt hour that they are metered into their house, they are paying the rate of what it is, or what it would cost to bring in that green power. But it's not necessarily green power that's coming into the house. And it's legally and contractually correct. It's not nefarious and it's not deceitful. Because the cost is simply being passed on. The cost for non-firm renewable energy is simply being passed on to the customers who want to buy it. Okay? And that's kind of an important point. Increasing the demand for renewable energy also spurs the increase for supply in the market. And this is a net benefit. So if more customers are asking for renewable energy, then there will be more projects available to buy that. And again, it's just important that as we move from passive customers to active customers, that we know what we understand what we're buying. All right, so then the last concept here is PCIA. PCIA, is Power Charge Indifference Agreement, adjustment. So PG&E, what this is really is just the cost of moving from a monopoly to a free market. Is that PG&E made the investment, they took the risk, they built and bought the infrastructure, and they subscribed all the customers. And they are well within their right to seek compensation for that loss if those assets are being used, or if those customers are now being used for other businesses. The risk is that PCIA right now is not it's not capped and it's not sunsetted. So until that happens, it's a lever, it's a hammer that's out there that PG&E can use to ultimately harm load-serving entities. It's just, this is a transition that's happening in the market. It's something that I want the LSEs that are in the room to kind of discuss and how they're going to mitigate this risk. But it's a real risk that's out there. It's a cost. And you know, I'm a capitalist, and PG&E is well within its right. They have these assets are being used for other businesses. They should be compensated for that injury, but for how long? And that's what needs to be, that's an answer. And that's it. That's the end of it.
Thanks, John. We're going to hold it.
Okay, my question is specifically for John. Can I, John, can I ask it now, or is that you want to ask at the end?
Go for it.
What power do you pay for at your house?
Well, we have solar. We buy PG&E, and that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me do a comment. Sorry.
I just need a little bit of clarity. It's not really a comment. Can you just talk a little bit about RECs and unidentifiable sources of power on power mixes?
I want the RECs.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's a great question. It's going to be addressed in the fourth presentation in detail, and because it's important. It really is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Right. Okay, let's keep moving. Thank you so much. That made me hungry. JR, you're up.
Well, as a, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out. I know we all have busy schedules and priorities, but I think I'm warmed in the heart that a lot of people want to come out tonight to learn about community choice and the power of choice that you're ultimately going to be able to hopefully decide on. And I want to give kudos to Dino Pick to put on this workshop. This takes a lot of effort, and I think vision on behalf of the city to address this question accurately and effectively. So I want to give you a big shout out to the fact that the city is doing rigorous analysis, is spending the time to make sure that what they're ultimately going to make a decision upon is the best decision for their businesses and their residents and city operations. So again, I want to acknowledge that. But I also want to acknowledge the young folks in the room tonight. I think you folks are half of the reason why we do all this. I have a 2-year-old at home. I got another one on the way. I'm here for this revolution that's happening. I want to make sure that we have clean air, clean water, and a clean environment to thrive on, that there is equitable access to this great place called California, and we could not have done that without this revolution of the energy markets that's going on right now. PG&E had a 12% renewable energy mix about 15, 16 years ago, and half of the reason why they are getting to this kind of cleaner mix is because of all the departing load. That's the reason why. Not because they're building new projects, not because they've got a new kind of impetus to keep going. We are the biggest, we're giving them the biggest benefactor of the fact that they can now claim 79% carbon free. In any event, on that note, let's talk about Monterey Bay Community Power and why we're here. There are 3 hallmark components to us: local choice, clean energy, and economic vitality. Next slide. So who we are, I think you're probably well aware of us. We are a beautiful joint powers authority that was created a little while ago. We started service for all commercial customers in March of this year, and we are actually having our residential launch on July 1st of this year, so really exciting time. So we're a joint powers authority of the 16 incorporated cities and the 3 counties. So we're actually the first tri-county regional CCA that's ever been launched. All the other CCAs that launched in the state of California either started kind of a hobblestone of a couple cities coupled together or a county here and there. But this was the first time in CCA history an entire region came together, which just shows you the strength and the resilience and the fortitude of the Monterey Bay region. So a big shout out to everybody here in the Monterey Bay region. How we got here, I bring this up because there was a lot of time and effort and analysis and thought and community engagement that was put into forming this Joint Powers Authority. From the time that grant was received for the Community Choice Energy Study until basically the JPA was formed, and then we launched service, we're looking at 5 years. 5 years of outreach, of engagement, of supporting all the member agencies to make sure everybody was making the right decision for their community. That's a lot of time, and I just want to acknowledge that this wasn't something that magically happened overnight, which I've heard a lot of the times people get upset about that they never heard about this. But when we kind of outline a timeline like this, hopefully this kind of rest assured some issues of not knowing about this type of program. So in terms of power resources, I know Dino had sent us some really great questions to fire off, and let's just jump into them. So in terms of what are your power resources, so right now our mix is 30% eligible renewables. So that means small scale hydro, 30 megawatts or less, geothermal, biomass or biogas, wind, and solar. Those are what you call eligible renewables according to the Renewable Portfolio Standard. We also have contracted for 70% large hydro. Technically, from a combustion standpoint, that is a carbon-free mix. And based on the way the greenhouse gas accounting world works right now, we can call ourselves carbon-free. The great thing about that is we can help bring on carbon-free electricity into that bathtub to hopefully replace those kind of dirty fossil fuel-based electrons. So that's the whole big point of these CCAs coming online, putting cleaner electrons or cleaner molecules into that bathtub so cleaner molecules are taken out. In terms of the geography of our power, our eligible renewables are a mixture of California-based and Pacific Northwest, and then most of our hydro comes from the Pacific Northwest. And this is a list of our power resources as of right now. The acronym on the side, product PCC1, means bucket 1, or what the Renewable Portfolio Standard calls in-state renewables, or they have a connection point with the transmission grid in California. That's what they call kind of in-state resources. And then CF stands for carbon-free. Some of them aren't identified yet because as of right now, we're getting all our procurement in place to make sure that we can claim all the type of percentages that we have in our resource mix once all the settlements come in from our contractors. But I think it's really great to see that we are focusing a lot on California renewables as well as carbon-free resources and large hydro. But again, the great thing about us as a JPA, our board can help kind of shape our procurement mix. So and basically, we want the customers to tell us what type of power mix we have. Great point. Monterey Bay Aquarium came to one of our board meetings. They wanted a 100% renewable energy product. Guess what? We're launching MB Prime, which is 100% renewable energy, on July 1st. So we listen to the community. We have a dialogue with the community. You have a voice at our table. Now, in terms of cost savings, I did a quick kind of back-of-the-hand calculation. Now, again, if Del Rey Oaks moves forward with either option with Pilot Power or MBCP, technically they wouldn't be able to enroll and start service until 2020. But kind of looking at an estimated accounts, we're looking at maybe a little over $50,000 that would have been put back in customers' pockets for Del Rey Oaks residents between 2018 and 2019. So you wouldn't be able to get the benefit of our 3% rebate this year, 4% estimated next year, but you would actually be able to capitalize on a 5% rebate in 2020. So in a funny way, getting on board with us by 2020 enrollment, you'd be able to maximize those financial benefits. Now, in terms of who we are and what we do and what kind of reinvestment we have, our model, the way in which the city could benefit from it is through those rebates. So again, you would be able to get a 5% rebate for city operations that you could put in a little fund to basically reinvest for green initiatives or energy initiatives. But in terms of the community reinvestment, those dollars that we put back in our rebates, those go back into our community pockets. Those get reinvested in restaurants, shops and whatnot, local businesses. But additionally, we have programs that we're developing. So the big thing about us as a joint powers authority that has identified electrification as a hallmark of our joint powers authority is you'll be able to benefit from getting into electric vehicles, switching out gas hot water heaters for heat pump hot water heaters, learning how to install hopefully solar arrays and whatnot, and focusing on building up a lot of great local resources that hopefully we can then aggregate and think about some innovative ways to leverage those. Now, in terms of Dino also asked us, let us know the risks. Let's not pull any punches here and try to sugarcoat things. There are risks with these programs, whether it's with Pilot or us, or even PG&E. I think the other thing you need to realize is, if this option weren't on the table, you'd be subject to all the risks that PG&E puts forth every year without a choice. You have no say at the table. You have no way to be able to kind of influence rates or anything. You're pretty much given a product, and that's it. Take it or leave it. So in terms of the risks that we face, legislative, regulatory, the PCIA, that exit fee is always something that's really interesting. It's going to be an issue that we're dealing with right now, the resource adequacy. But again, we also acknowledge that energy market and price fluctuations. But we're actually one of the first CCAs that established a risk management committee of our power procurement team as well as elected officials to get together to discuss to make sure that we have a risk management policy in place for our procurement. That's, again, another level of transparency that we bring to the table. But again, the benefits, local control and accountability, you have a seat at our table. You can come to our board meetings. We had a great operations board meeting. We have a policy board meeting, as well as we've just launched and starting our first community advisory council meeting on July 10th. We have 11 community members from all 3 counties coming together to help advise us and provide us input about the kind of vision and the future of Monterey Bay Community Power. That's why we can call ourselves a community choice aggregation agency. And then again, just some highlights. I think I probably touched upon all of those. But I did also want to mention that we have a local solar RFO right now for 1 to 3 megawatts for up to 20 megawatts in total. So we're looking to the market in the Tri-County region to see what type of renewables can be built here. And on that note, I will end our conclusion, but thank you very much, Stephen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, Dennis from Pilot Power.
First, I want to thank Dino for inviting me to speak to everybody here today. I actually got a call this afternoon from one of my staff who's actually up in meeting right now at several meetings, and sort of forewarned me that it might be a tough crowd today, as there's going to be a few advocates for Monterey Bay Community Power. So hopefully I can do do justice to what has been presented so far. But something that needs to be clarified, because I know the pilot's name keeps being brought up. This is not a pilot program. This is a King City Community Power CCA. We were hired to present. Oh, I'm sorry. We were reached out by King City's City Council, the mayor. Directly called me and asked, that they have been approached by Monterey Bay, and they wanted to see what other options were available to them. And we talked to them about the fact that, as pilot, as a energy service provider, we are able to provide them a full service solution, which includes procurement, customer service, data management, pretty much the whole enchilada in essence. And really, it was to avoid having to hire consultants, outside parties. There's not one CCA that is established today that doesn't have consultants running around, outside parties, similar to ourselves, because they need to have an energy service provider to actually procure. You have to, it's stable. So we basically provided that full service package to them. And the biggest challenge that King City had was they believed that they were not going to reap the benefit of participating in Monterey Bay other than savings possible. But they felt that the downstream effect of jobs, programs in their community just was not going to happen. They are too small of a community, and King City has key issues that they want to address. So what had happened is that King City invited Monterey Bay Community Power as well as ourselves to present. The city ultimately declined membership. They released an RFP. Several providers had presented options to them. They selected us. We went through a feasibility phase, first and second reading of the ordinance, and eventually the city adopted implementation, and we are going to be launching KCCP July 2nd. One of the questions to us was, where is pilot procuring, or who we procure from? So we have, and here I've named companies that we actually have enabling agreements with that we're able to procure on an ongoing basis. We have a credit relationship with them, and that's additionally another key issue with King City. Their biggest concern was they didn't have the financial wherewithal to basically go out and establish a credit facility, have loans against the city itself, write guarantees. And so Pilot Power, as part of our package, has offered credit support so that we will procure on their behalf. They purchase directly from us, and they don't have to put up any collateral. We haven't invoiced, we're launching next week. We haven't invoiced King City one invoice yet. Everything has been done under our cost. Only costs that we basically have accrued is actually checks that we've had to write on behalf of the city. And we're writing those checks for the city, so that for 3 months in the initial launch, they don't have to pay one invoice, because the idea is we want them to ramp up and build a kitty so that they can start paying their own bills and so on and so forth. And so that was, again, another benefit of why they wanted to come to us. One of the questions is where is the renewable energy coming from? And again, we have the same list of players out there. It's nothing different. We've got wind and solar projects. These are actually contracted suppliers. Obviously, California, Oregon, and Washington. The triangles are wind projects, and the circle is the solar project, and those are actual locations. The product offering, and again, the city drove this. We are just basically taking their direction. We obviously provide advice and make suggestions, but really it's the decision of the city. And their decision was, we want to establish the CCA, make it be able to stand on its own, and not burden it with plan. So I didn't make this up, to be able to hear this presentation. This has been in our implementation from the start. That they will actually ramp up to 50% renewable energy portfolio with a balance of the portfolio to be a GHG-free energy. We've also initiated 2 programs, Green Start and Green Complete, albeit these are still to be approved by City Council. These will launch in October 2018. It'll be a 50% Cat 1 and 100% Cat 1 product available to the customers, and it would be an opt-out program, because understand that if you buy renewable energy, that comes at a cost. And so they have to be able to pass that on to the constituents of who wants to procure or basically feel comfortable they're buying 100% or 50%. That additional cost will be borne by the individual who basically elects to go to these programs. There's going to be a lot of discussion about greenhouse gases, and really, is it GHG free? I'm not really here to debate that, but for when Delray Oaks wants to launch in 2020, will be a 50% Cat 1 renewable product with a balance of 50% GHG energy. Alternatively, the city is also looking at, and they're actually speaking to various companies right now, and establishing a 3 to 5 megawatt local solar project in their community. They already got a site scoped out, they know where it's going to be. We've already had conversations with PG&E for interconnects. And this is part of what the community has decided they want to do. So if they're going through a feasibility phase right now and assessing is what they need to do, obviously it's not feasible for them to do it. They will continue with the 50% renewable with the 50% GHG free. Savings, that's key for everybody. This is just an example of the E1 rate schedule as well as the A1 rate schedule, which is a residential and commercial customer. It's a comparison from what PG&E versus what KCCP would provide. That's the breakdown. Each CCA will eventually have to do this sort of type schedule and have it on their websites to be able to demonstrate to their customers. And then the value proposition for the community. Again, for King City, and I'm just going to talk about King City first, their whole sort of mandate for their CCA is bringing something to the community that's tangible to them. They're going to get immediate savings, so that it's not a rebate, it's actual savings, so it stays in their pocket initially, or like at the from the onset. But also, we've partnered with Grid Alternatives, who is actually going to be installing rooftop solar for limited income households. The city is investing in that. As part of our commitment to the city, we've actually donated to that program as well. Financial donation, so that basically they can kickstart that whole operation. As well as in King City's community, they've had a real issue with crime, and they have looking to install solar-powered streetlights through the community and have that through their entire program. So their community is actually going to see tangible investment in that community other than just savings. For Delray Oaks, and obviously we've had no discussion as to what the objectives are other than what was listed earlier and what kind of project, but funds could be available to do energy-related projects, increase savings for its customers, and then increase renewable energy if that's what they choose. So again, our role as pilot is to basically facilitate the CCA. We're not running the CCA, it's not our CCA, it's the community CCA. And then obviously the risks are the same for us as it is for any other CCA in California. There's load risk, which obviously is the unexpected increases in size of the CCA load. We can't predict, we try to predict what the opt-out rate is, which customer is going to opt out. We make some assumptions in your modeling. There's exposure to under and over procurement of energy, legal and regulatory risk, and there's a whole slew of acronyms that are all California-based. Supply risk, power prices are correlated to natural gas prices. Demand for renewable energies grow faster than the actual production of renewable renewable component very expensive. And then there's a financial risk, and I mentioned before, there is no startup cost for King City. We haven't billed them one penny yet. They haven't had to put up a secure line to support the transactions. We're in procurement right now. We've obviously procured RA, or resource adequacy, is a huge issue at the moment. We've procured for the next 5 years for RA, so we are covered for the community. And again, we are writing those checks to the various suppliers for that on behalf of the city. That is just knowing that they're not having to go into their general fund or basically having to take money out of their own pockets today. All the revenue that comes through the CCA will basically facilitate payments later on. And then, obviously, if an event, I know there's a risk for the community here asking, well, what happens if we step away from the CCA or whatever doesn't work? Yes, those risks all exist. You have the ability, no different than the IOUs, to increase rates to basically generate revenues. And that's just, one of the avenues. We are not going back to the city saying, hey, we need you to cut us a check for X amount of money to cover off this cost. These are the risks that we're taking because that's why we value launching this program. It's a very small city and making it successful for them. And I just want to highlight the partners that we've got working. Obviously, our Power Group, EDMS, which is the data manager, is also a sister company to Pilot and Grid Alternatives. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. All right, so hold the questions. I can't wait to get to the Q&A. We got one more brief. Jim Phelps. So let me just, by way of introduction, so you've heard from folks that want to provide us a service. The challenge that the city has had, at least from my perspective, for the last year, was some kind of what I would characterize as sort of objective analysis of CCAs, the regulatory framework, the markets. What are we really getting ourselves into here? I reached out to Jim about 10 months ago. We started a dialogue back and forth, and I invited him down today to present. The presentation is going to be about 15 to 20 minutes. I'm going to apologize to the young people ahead of time. Go out and get something to eat or drink, or hopefully you get your phone with you. This is kind of a bit more technical than the briefings we've gotten so far, but it's intentionally meant to be so. So by way of introduction, Jim, come on.
Okay, so a little bit about me and how did I end up here? And how did I end up following CCA? First of all, I don't have anything to do with any CCAs or any CCAs anywhere. My background is in power engineering. And about 10 years ago, a group came through my hometown in Marin, and they were talking about this new program they were going to start. It was going to launch. It was going to be the first CCA to launch in Marin County, or in California to launch. And we were all invited to submit questions. So I submitted a question. I wrote it on my little card, handed it in, waited a few verses for my answer, and I never got one. They didn't answer it. And I thought, that's not good. Why wouldn't you answer the question? Even if you don't know what it is, say, hey, who asked that? I'll get right back to you as soon as I know. Thank you for asking. But no answer. So as a result of that, I think that's probably why I'm here today. That really kind of got my radar up, and I said, let's just see what's going on. You also want to know, as far as my relationship goes with PG&E, I don't have one. I used to do contract work for them. The last time I did work for them was in 1989 and 1990. We sued them, and we won. was the end of our relationship with PG&E. And some people say, well, Jim is, he must be getting paid by PG&E or whatever. No, I'm not. I'm just trying to shine light on what all has happened. So, CCA started in Marin County, and I'm going to say everywhere because Marin County was ground zero. They started and their promises were, they said, there's problems. We have greenhouse gas emissions, we've got climate change going on. There's this demand for clean energy, green energy, and the prices are high. And we can answer all of those, and we can do it simply. The solution, of course, was CCA. In this case, it was Marin Clean Energy, or Marin Energy Authority. They promised they would be green or greener than PG&E. One of the benefits that they definitely brought to the community was that people felt good. I mean, they really felt like they were doing something. And I know you guys are out here tonight, and I applaud you, and I know you want to help in any way you can. And certainly people in Marin County felt that they were doing something good. They were contributing to the plan. Another benefit, another thing that CCAs bring, we all know, is choice. And some of you, I know you have your little choice buttons on. I've never been to a meeting where I've had two CCAs competing for one customer. I think that's kind of cool. That's choice. And then you have PG&E, and PG&E has a couple of other choices within it. But the problem with CCAs, when I started really looking at them and really dissecting, was their use of renewable energy certificates. Now there's three kinds, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but there are two that are particularly, I would classify as not great, and those are the last two of three, so that would be number 2 and number 3. PCC2, PCC3. Another problem that's coming up now with, that's surfacing with CCAs is they're not constructing new generation on the scale that's needed. Now what's happening? Well, PG&E and all the investor-owned utilities used to build all that stuff in California. And we didn't really pay attention to it. It just kind of happened and life went on and that was that. PG&E and SCE and San Diego Gas Electric are now pushing back and saying, we're not building anymore. All of our customers are getting switched into, or all of the ratepayers, our customers sounds proprietary, all of the ratepayers are getting switched into these CCAs. We were responsible for building new construction for them. They're gone. We're not going to build it anymore. The guys who have the customers can build it. Well, that's brought on its own problems, predominantly that a lot of the CCAs are undercapitalized to build on the scale that they need to. Another problem with CCAs, and even PG&E to that extent, is large hydro. Especially from the Pacific Northwest. A lot of those contracts from Pacific Northwest Hydro include substitution clauses. And the substitution clauses give the wholesalers the right to put whatever energy they need in if they can't get because of low flow, low rainfall, or no transmission. For whatever reason, they can provide substitute power. And that substitute power is very much analogous to what I would call a PCC2 rec. It's just a different way of, shall I say, selling dirty power. And the last is the Aggregation. 18 million megawatt hours a year gone, probably by 2025. Whether you like it or not, we're going to have to replace that. And whoever's got the ratepayers better be building new construction. So my solution here before I move on is Delray Oaks is really in the driver's seat. They really are. You've got two people competing for you. You have PG&E, you got lots of choices. And my suggestion is, whatever you do, make sure you have safeguards built into your contract with your CCA if you decide to pursue CCA. And that doesn't mean accepting a boilerplate contract. So we're going to get into some of that in a bit. So the first thing is Monterey Bay Clean Power. And my issue with Monterey is kind of looking forward, and it's not about them specifically, but it's about what's happened in the past. There are a number of consultants in the industry who specialize, very good, very shrewd, and they move from CCA to CCA, and they've got quite a clientele. Marine Clean Energy's consultant, primary consultant who was really driving that entity through launch and now even through its operation is a consultant to Monterey Bay Clean Power. Now, at Marine Clean Energy, we had an offer that was dangled in front of us, and it was good, it was great. And that offer was that our exit fees were going to be paid. Marine Clean Energy had a meet or beat requirement, or that was what their pledge was. And they were paying our exit fees. Pretty good. And especially if a lot of people get switched in the program and they don't know, then I think that's a great balance. 9 months after MCE launched, they announced a 14% price cut. And that hit the papers, and people on the streets were talking about it, and they loved it. It's a 14% price cut. Now, in the back of this news story, in the local morning paper, highlighted, says part of that 14% rate cut will be paid by discontinuing a credit that the authority was paying to customers to offset a special fee. That special fee is the exit fee, PCIA. And it is a huge, whether we want to address it or acknowledge it or not, it is a huge variable right now. Huge. It is active right now at the Utilities Commission. It's going to be probably going up, but I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing it will. You notice at the bottom, it says the surcharge is larger than it needs to be. That's the CEO talking. And she expects the Utilities Commission will soon require a substantial reduction in size. By the way, do you all have a copy of this? You have a copy of it. So you know down at the bottom, the PG&E surcharge increased after we got our 14% rate reduction. That 14% rate reduction turned out to be zero for most people. Some people, they actually got a 20% rate increase, and there were a few that had a 14% rate reduction, but they had to use a lot of power to make that happen. I bring all this up because Monterey Bay Clean Power is talking about a 3% minimum rebate. Great, I think that's good. It sounds really, really enticing. Is it real? How long? Same guys behind Monterey that were at work. This is the same kind of arrangement that was offered to Marin, now showing Monterey in different language. This next table is loaded with information, you guys, and I just have to net it out for you. I'm trying to show the actual operating CCAs in 2016 who filed with regulators their energy, their power source disclosure agreements or their schedules. And when you look at those, if you know where to go and you know how to pull them apart, you can really look and see what's clean and what isn't, even if it's called clean. And you notice up there on the top, Sonoma Clean Power. Their annual emission rate is advertised on the website as 97 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. But if you know how to calculate what's actually dirty power system power, it's the general mix that is on the grid. It's called unspecified sources or system power. And if you know how to pull out, you know where to go and how to pull out the various data, you can identify the various RECs, renewable energy certificates. And these are not bundled RECs, there's 3 kinds. Just to get this one out of the way, 3 kinds. Bundled is where you have the energy delivered to California, and you have the certificate that accompanies it. And that is the good stuff. That's what you want. Unbundled, and then there are 2 others. The second is called firm and shape. I don't want to get into the mechanics of that right now. And third is a unbundled, and those 2 are kind of cousins to each other. Those 2 are the ones that cause the difference between the annual emission and the actual emission. So that actual emission has been revised per AB 1110. It's a law that's going through the CEC right now to clean up reporting of greenhouse gas emissions, so that we don't get the black numbers, we get the red ones. That last number over there, I didn't know if anybody would care, but I just, at one point, a couple of weeks ago, I thought, what are they saving people? I mean, in Marine, we were promised all kinds of stuff. all kinds of money savings. So I started adding that to the table, and I go from 56 cents a month to $1.95. Now, I don't know about you guys, my car probably has that much change just kind of kicking around on the footwell. It's not a great savings. So, when I looked at that, I said, for Delray Oaks, I mean, if they really want to consider CCA in this case, what's the big benefit here? And I let that go, and I just let that kind of reside for a little bit. Because it's the second point up there on the bottom that really drives this whole thing of CCAs home. If you want to, and by the way, I'm going to read this. This is from tonight's amended community choice workshop. City priorities number 3. Remember, the first one listed, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So forget the numbers up there right now. I'm asking you to just suspend that and listen. If you want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the only way you're going to do it is if you build new resources. Because the resources that are out there right now have been out there forever, and they've already been reducing or done their reduction. What happens is a lot of these CCAs and PG&E to an extent, although I have to give PG&E some slack because they built a lot of these resources. But a lot of these resources will show up on these annual power source disclosure lists. And what you see is different CCAs are just kind of shuffling this stuff back and forth. And they're showing how low their annual greenhouse gas emission rate is. And that's great. But here's to make the point, to drive it home. If you're a CCA and you're using existing resources that have been out there for 15 or 20, 25 years, and you say you're a 0 GHG CCA, good for you. Good for you. You legitimately are a 0 GHG emitting CCA. But if we look at Delray Oaks, number 1 priority, reduce greenhouse gases. If you're a 0 GHG emitter and you've been buying all this existing stuff, you haven't reduced a thing. You just look great. And I'll let you guys kind of think about all that, the value of this whole thing on your own. The CCAs have, I applaud all you guys for showing up and selling your CCAs. I think that's great. I think CCAs are, fundamentally, they're a great concept. But one of the things that's not talked about are these joint powers authority agreements that you have to sign if you're a municipality and you join a CCA. The JPA, Joint Powers Authority, these are a culmination or a group of all the cities, all the municipalities and counties and towns who are in a CCA. And they collectively come together, and the legal construct is a Joint Powers Authority. When you look at Monterey Bay's, or any of the CCAs, except the pilot, I haven't seen one from them. I don't think it exists, at least in this one. But that JPA agreement includes the following. These are things that if you are a municipality, or if you're a taxpayer in a municipality, you better care about it. You really better care about this. More than just saying, I'm green and I really want something green and I want to make a difference in the planet. Power purchase agreement, PPA, liability if you depart. If you depart, Monterey Bay Clean Power. They buy power on behalf of Delray Oaks. Delray Oaks one day says, we want to be in this. Okay. Maybe we can resell your power, maybe we can't. But if we can't, you guys owe us for that power purchase agreement. Now, we may build resources, new resources. That's great. Remember I said you got to build new. You have to build them. You want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you got to build new resources. One of the ways to do it is if you have the capital, you should buy them. Delray Oaks may say, well, we don't want to do that. Well, in the JPA agreement, it's not clear if Delray Oaks says we want to be in that or we don't. Is it a majority vote by the other JPA members and then Delray Oaks gets swept in? I don't know. If you read it and you can figure it out, let me know, because I couldn't. The language is not clear. Same thing on litigation. If the JPA says we're going to litigate, who knows? Now, eminent domain, I like this. I thought this was better than I see in most CCAs because of that 75% number. Eminent domain. The CCA says we're going to build new resources. And we need that land over there. We're going to pay you fair market value, whatever that is. And Delray Oaks, again, I'm going to use Delray Oaks because they're the host here. Delray Oaks says we don't want to do that. In fact, that's in our own town. We don't want you guys doing eminent domain in our town. The JPA agreement says eminent domain passes if 75% of the board members in the JPA are present and they vote for it. Now, I didn't see a quorum number in there. Maybe it's there. I don't know. But just to take it to an extreme, just so the math is easy. Let's just say you have a board of 15 municipalities. But at this particular meeting, only 4 of them show up. And 3 of them say, we're going to do eminent domain on Delray Oaks. I don't know what the quorum numbers are for that, but it wasn't clear to me. It may be, I don't know. The loan guarantee money, if any, remains in the JPA if Delray Oaks withdraws. If Delray Oaks is fired from the JPA, Dino's a likable guy, but he may go sideways with somebody. And then they go, you know, I don't really like that guy. He's out of here. In fact, I don't like his town or anybody in it because they all look like him. Delray Oaks is out of here. And Delray Oaks says, well, you're involuntarily terminating. We don't care. We don't like you, you're out. For whatever reason. The language is in there. Now, what I just said, you may go, that's never going to happen. If it's never going to happen, take the language out. The language is in there. So, under that guise, Delray Oaks may be subject to ongoing liabilities. It does say may be in that agreement. May. Okay, modifications. If you don't like the way, if Delray Oaks or whoever is in this JPA agreement, and they don't like the way it's written, or somebody else doesn't like the way it's written, there is a subset of the JPA board called the policy board. And 2/3 of the policy board members can vote to change whatever they want. So let's be ridiculous. Let's just say there's 4 people on the policy board. One of them doesn't show up. So now there's 3 people. 2 of them vote to change something on the JPA. By the language that I read, it passes. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. But anyway, it's there. And the last is probably the most compelling. It's not just Monterey Bay, it's for every JPA that's out there. The board packets that these guys get, that they give to their board members, their JPA members, are incredible. 100 is, I would say, would be reasonable, comparatively speaking. I've seen them in Marin over 300 pages. Not often, but they're there. There's no way an average person who is a council member, has a family, has a job, and then is going to go to this JPA meeting, has time to really review, read, and digest all of that. So what happens? I'm overwhelmed. How does that manifest? At Marin, they've had over 1,000 individual agenda items that have come before the board. Not one member, I'm not saying not one agenda item, not one member of any of the boards that have changed over the years has voted no on any single agenda item. Not one. Unless they did last month and I missed it. But, does that seem odd to you? You have a board that's controlling and steering these things, and over the years, not one item has been voted against? That's problematic for me. Let's take a look at pilot. I did not find I found a full service agreement, but I didn't find anything that looked like a JPA agreement. But these are some of the concerns I had, and maybe they'll be addressed in the Q&A. The pilot serves as a 5-year. They'll serve a 5-year management term. What happens after 5 years? What's the new annual fee? Right now it's $200,000 a year. What happens after after 5 years? I don't know. Say it goes up to $1 million. I don't know. And in Delray Oaks, can they say, we're out of here? I don't know. I think they can, but I'll let Pilot address that in the Q&A. We go to power purchase agreement, or energy contracts. PPA energy contracts, you said interchangeably. What's the ongoing liability for Delray Oaks if they apply? Now, Delray Oaks uses these things, as I understand, called an enabling agreement. And admittedly, I don't know everything about the energy business. I think I know a lot, but I don't know what an enabling agreement is, so we'll hear from Pilot maybe in the Q&A on that. Do the energy contracts that Pilot executes, do they all expire when Pilot leaves, or when Pilot's management is over? I don't know. I think they do, but I don't know. I'm not sure. If they don't, where does that leave Delray Oaks if they want to leave on the power purchase agreements? If they do expire with Pilot's management in 5 years, what are Delray Oaks' new energy prices? I don't know. If they don't, I don't have any idea. And the last thing, which is everybody is going to need to address, is SB 350. 65% of your renewable portfolio standard energy contracts starting in 2021 are going to need to be a minimum of 10 years in length. I don't know where that leaves Pilot, 5 years from now or whatever, and then that puts us at 2022, but then you have this 2021. I'm not clear on where they are. I am clear on this. We do not have enough renewable sources that are getting built. But everybody, come 2021, is going to be loading up on 10-year contracts. What do you think is going to happen to renewable energy prices? They're going up. They're going crazy. Unless there is this huge plethora of renewable energy supply that comes on the market that I'm not seeing. So summary considerations for Delray Oaks. Side stream and rebates. Are they real? How much money? How long are they going to last? If none of that happens, but this carrot is dangled in front of Delray Oaks, what's Delray Oaks' recourse? Is there a penalty that they can invoke? I don't know. The clean energy. You've already heard me talk about new construction. Net new resources called additionality. What about RECs? These PCC2 and PCC3. They are, we'll get into that Q&A maybe. But you don't want those. You don't. You just don't want them. Delivered hydro imports. Are they actually delivered from Pacific Northwest, or is that stealth PCC2 type? I should have put type after that. PCC2 type energy. What is it that you're getting from the Pacific Northwest? I don't know, but when you read some of those contracts, not good. So what's Delray Oaks' recourse? And finally, on cost and risk, PCIA is huge. It's being litigated right now. Nobody knows. My guess is it's going to go up. And I say that because last year at the CPUC, they held a hearing called Unbonk, and that's about CCAs and just PG&E and all the utilities and what's going on. And during that hearing, there were two guys from the Utilities Commission that said, the PCIA is flawed. It's not, we haven't done it right. It's not good. We read the tea leaves, and where does that leave us now? Green Book uncertainty. The Green Book is a book that the CPUC put out in early May. It was calling for the stakeholders in the energy market and for consumers to give them feedback, which I thought was I kind of like that, and it bothered me. I thought, gosh, isn't this the Utilities Commission's job? I mean, they're asking us to help them, and they're asking for help because it's a big problem. Those resources are not getting built, and they're saying, what do? We have a problem coming. Now, you're probably going to hear from various CCA people, oh, that's not right. We have lots of new energy getting built. Well, okay. Is it enough? And it may be enough for them, but what about all the other CCAs? Los Angeles has a huge CCA. They promised in their business plan to build 50 1-megawatt solar farms in their business plan. A year later, they said, we'll consider, but our plan right now is to buy existing power through PPAs. They're not going to reduce any greenhouse gases, but people may feel better. And the last thing is probably the most I say probably the most, they're all important. The last thing, Senate Bill 237, today, in Sacramento, that was in Senate chambers. And SB 237 has been gutted. It was a driver's license bill. It is now a bill for direct access. And that direct access opens up the market so that commercial and industrial users can go into direct access, which is a competitor of CCA and a competitor of PG&E. Delray Oaks, I was just talking, I looked at some of these numbers. It looked like about half of the load in this city is commercial. There's no industrial. But if they fall within 237, that's just something to consider. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so if I could ask Jim, John, Dennis, and Tom, please, to come up here to the hot seats. We'll segue to some Q&A and public comment. So obviously there's a lot of information here in the last hour, and I really sincerely want to thank you all for coming and hearing. These are important and very, very complex subjects for any town, any jurisdiction, but particularly for a very small jurisdiction like ourselves. So with that, what I'd like to do is open it up. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and I'll call on you. If you want to speak, make a public comment, we'll do 2 minutes, and you can come up and speak in the microphone. Yes, sir.
I'd like to come up.
Please.
Hi, I'm Larry Turner, and I live in Rose. I want to thank all of you for getting this together. Something we really need to hear. There are many other cities that have joined us. And I'm sure that they must have also done a lot of research on the risks and benefits. They've probably done actuarial studies that have determined that it was better to go ahead with it as opposed to the loss, and perhaps the benefit to the citizens and maybe the cities themselves was worth the risk. I'm wondering if Delray Oaks has researched and done any actuarial studies to see what the risk to Delray Oaks would be if they joined us. So that's it.
So that's a question for me. I'll take that. Larry, thank you so much. So first off, I frankly would I'm not sure the other cities have done actuarial studies. If they have, I have not seen them. I've been in contact with other city managers. There are no robust risk analysis studies that I've been able to avail myself of that the counties or the cities have done, number one. Number two, in terms of our risk analysis, this is an important part of that. And frankly, Jim Phelps and our city attorney have been a big part of looking at the agreement, the JPA agreement. I will tell you, it's very difficult to quantify the risk of joining a CCA the way I would like to quantify risk. I'd like to be able to go to my policymakers and be very clear about precisely what risk we're taking. It's proven exceedingly difficult to do, particularly for our size staff, but this is part of our due diligence. Okay.
So do you, have you, as a preliminary finding, felt that the risks, like what this man just presented, outweigh the benefits to the citizens and the city itself?
So our initial finding Monterey Bay Community Power's JPA was that there were clauses that we had concern with. And so we waited on any kind of on joining, and we started looking at other options. As you know, the city joined Solar Choice about 10 months ago with PG&E from our city accounts. And then we started looking at King City as well. Now, the King City agreement is different. It's a contractual agreement, not a JPA structure, with a sister city. So two elements. So it's different in structure, and we're continuing to explore it. It appears at this point in our review to have less risk, but that's part of the reason why we're here to really get this all kicked out, to hear comments and questions from all of you as well.
Thank you, gentlemen, I really appreciate putting all this together. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, let me go back to Rolf and Katie. Rolf?
Thank you for putting this on. One of the problems I have with it is that the benefit is presented in some of the misleading way, and that the idea that you have a choice of what electricity you get. You may sign up for a choice, but in fact, of course, what you get is exactly the same power as what your neighbor gets. You don't get, if you can sign up for deep green or whatever the names are, but the power that runs your toaster is still the same as what your neighbor gets. So that benefit is really, you may be contributing in some of a larger sense to some group thing, but many people believe that when you sign up for that your house runs on solar energy, everything else, and that's simply not true. And so that benefit, I think, has to be discounted, at least on the individual level. The other thing is, as Jim pointed out, unless the only benefit from this is if additional power plants, clean power is built. Otherwise, it's just a shell game. You're just moving. If the power is being produced up in the Columbia River, they just use it up there. Why send it down here? We need to build power. Either put solar panels on people's houses or build the plants. Otherwise, I just can't see any justification for the city taking any risk at all, financial risk at all, to move power around in the shell game.
Thank you. Thank you, Rolf. Tom, you want to
Yeah, sure.
address?
I know this point keeps coming up, which is what kind of energy are we getting? Is it cleaner or not green? Whatever you get in your home is pure electricity, and it is what comes from the grid. To the extent that you want to become greener, then you source more green electricity. In that respect, Monterey Bay have signed up today for a 45% share of a 200 megawatt wind generation, where negotiations that are about to conclude maybe in about somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks for a total of 300 megawatt of solar generation plus 90 megawatt of storage. And all the solar and the storage are right here in California. So that is a total of 45% to 500 megawatt of clean and renewable resources are being built here. And here's the best part of it. We're actually buying those resources at lower cost than what it would cost us if we go out and buy natural gas generation. The misconception that a lot of people fall into is that green power is generally more expensive and you're going to have to pay extra for it. It's just not true. Not today. It used to be. Maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, PG&E paid 16 cents a kilowatt hour for some of the clean energy that we bought. That's not the case today. Today, we can actually go out and buy both solar and storage and buy at lower cost than what we can buy natural gas. You couldn't do that, quite frankly, if you are Delaware folks playing by yourself or playing with King City, because the size is small enough that you won't be able to actually get the kind of price that we got. We got the price that we got because we were negotiating for 500 megawatt, and not all for us, we were actually working in conjunction with Silicon Valley Clean Energy Partnership in order to be able to get the better price.
Well, no, there's no additional green energy total. In the Monterey Bay Aquarium, they negotiated and said, we don't want hydroelectric power. But in fact, they're going to get the same power as the store next door gets, the same mix.
Thanks. Appreciate that very much. Katie?
Okay, yeah, I have a question. Is Pilot Power for-profit company?
It is, I mean, it's a private corporation. You know, that is the business model we are. The charge that we are charging King City Community Power is out in the public domain. The nice thing is that that cost is capped. It's capped for the 5 years. And, you know, I know the question was, well, what happens after the 5 years? The reality is that you look at any CCA, going back as Marine, have you looked at the financials of Marine Clean Energy?
Done some of this.
So they have roughly, last I looked, around $50 million sitting on their books. So, I mean, if you want to call it a non-for-profit, I guess you can call it for tax reasons. But the reality is, it's not going to the customers. It's not going back to the customers. They're not a, zero profit. They are there to make. They have staff to pay. They have consultants to pay. They have contracts to supply.
They can reinvest locally, those kind of things. I have a quick question. Do you have a community advisory committee?
King City?
Yes.
No.
Or Pilot?
Well, Pilot is an energy service provider. We're not a CCA. So we're no different than other energy service providers that are in the state.
Like PG&E?
That's an IOU.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, let me get here real quick. So part of the problem is we don't have King City here. That's one fairly significant issue, actually, because I think about it now. The city council, elected by the people, is approving their community choice application. They're the executors.
Yeah.
Right. So King City, and if we were to join it, our city council would make that decision to join. And those councils, then, they are the decision-making bodies. They could establish other committees, I suppose, or they could serve as those bodies to ensure that residential concerns are being taken into account.
So PG&E, the shareholders, that you Pilot is for-profit, privately or privately?
We're privately held, but the reality is that any CCA who's procuring has to go through an energy service provider. All those energy service providers, such as the Energy Authority, TA, they are all there making profit. Everybody's making money along the way.
It just depends like where the money goes. Does it stay in a local area, or does it go to shareholders or owners, that type of thing?
I mean, the amount that we're charging, goes to the ownership of the Pilot. It's a private company, so, but that's been disclosed.
Nothing wrong with that?
No,
Can I step in? Can I step in? Sure. This is an open discussion, right? We're not.
Yeah, I'm just going to try to keep it managed going
All right,
forward, but yes,
okay, so
go ahead. Sure.
All right, well, no, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to see if there's a value judgment to whether there's a privately held company and a non-for-profit. Before you answer that, the one point that, because the question sounds as though we're deciding, or part of the decision matrix is you get your money this way and another choice would be, but it's not. Okay, then I'm mistaken in that. But I want to make this point clear, is that in the power market, it's capitalist. It's energy is a commodity, and when you go to market, you have to have the same capital requirements, the same credit requirements. And if you are a non-profit or if you are for-profit, it's all the same. It's all normalized.
I think part of the issue is, where does the money stay? And if it goes to
That's what I
shareholders,
was thinking.
it goes to shareholders or whatever. That's
Quite
fine.
frankly, I need to step in here because what I'm hearing is that it doesn't matter whether you're public or private, it's all the same. And I've worked for public companies, for cities for 30 years, and I'm working now for CCAs. And I never felt that working for public and working for private is the same thing. And I'm not in any way trying to say private is bad, public is good. And what I'm saying is, private does, if you work for a private company, then you always thinking about the people that own that company, and you have to keep their interest in mind, justifiably so. Everybody does it that way. If you're working for public, I only got one shareholder in mind, that's my customer. That's the one I need to please. If I don't please them, they don't make my council happy, my council is not happy, I'm miserable. So I have no split personality, one trying to please my shareholder and the other one is trying to please my customer. I only got my customer to please.
Sorry, let me add this. Sorry.
Yeah, David Chair. So I have a comment for you. You're talking about, I know dollars, and it's like, is it for profit or not for profit? Just two things to keep in mind. And I think Tom was right when he said it's all kind of coming out of the same thing. Pilot may, and I don't mean to be, I'm not stroking them at all. I don't want to be sure to put on that, but I'm just saying, they manage and because it's set up that way, they deserve to make a profit. And it's kind of a different structure than a CCA, which is community. But keep this in mind. The money comes out of CCAs in other ways. There is a consultant who handles several CCAs in Northern California who since 2010 has made in excess of $4 million. Not bad for government work. So, I mean, it does, the monies come out in different ways, whether it's for profit or not for profit. There are still people who are making a lot of money that, in my opinion, ought to be going to the citizens who got these things brought into the community in the form of lower prices, and not going to consultants and lawyers in the form of what I consider exorbitant fees.
Okay, I gotta put some numbers in.
I'm sorry, folks, let me, look, I know you guys.
I just need to put some context and numbers.
Okay, then we'll go back to the other.
Sorry, yeah, the numbers speak for themselves, and here are the numbers. All of our costs, including all of our staff, all 16 staff members that we have today, including office supplies, and everything that we spend, including consultants, comes to less than 2% of our total revenue. Now, I want to hear that from the representative of pilot or representative of PG&E. If they can tell me that they are spending less than 2% of their revenue on their staff and their consultants, then you ought to go with that.
Did you say 2%?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there, all right, can I say one thing?
Sure.
I'll just make it quick. So I was an independent power producer, meaning that I was for a for-profit company, and I would go, but I worked in renewable energies. And I found the fastest, most efficient, and best way to make big changes, to go build huge plants. The last plant that I built was a 300 megawatt solar power plant, was to go to the private capital markets and run the entire operation with private capital. And I had shareholders, and we were there to make profit, but we generated renewable energy. That and let me say this too. To solve our renewable energy issue or our climate change issue, it's going to take three. It's the three P's. You need public, and for policy. You need personal, which is us, either changing what we do or generating some of our own electricity, and you need private to make the investments into the major infrastructure investments that need to be made. It's a three stool, and so private, public, and personal is all, and that's really what's up here. You know, I mean, we're all basically working towards the same goal.
Okay, thank you. So, question? Gary?
Yeah, a couple things. We have a couple different questions. I'll put out, if you don't mind, I'm trying to remember, you can just answer them after I sit down. I would just make one comment. In getting ready for this, I did try to do as much research as I could, a lot of jobs and everything. Once I figured out how to get rid of mission responsible, you were a lot easier to find stuff out, and saved me a lot of time. I would say I'd be a lot more, I feel a lot better about this if we had someone from Marin County here to address this. I mean, all your readings have all been pretty negative and that's the first I've heard of that. I'm just curious where we're gonna put it. That's a great idea, love it. I did watch the give and take that went on for the 5 years that went on. If you were paying attention, it really wasn't hard to follow. County wanted this, I heard, County Supervisor Phillips was gonna go for it, they finally got him around, they made changes. So there was a lot of give and take within our local community that I saw going on. Risk management, we have yet, the mayor has yet to let the city attorney stand up here and actually give us a risk analysis, a legal risk analysis. I spent 25 years in the Navy flying off carriers. I know a little bit about risk analysis, it's what I did every single day. But no one has set up here and really explained it, or the mayor has, the city attorney come up and in a public forum, give us a good risk analysis. I mean, I still think that'd be something nice to do before we go any further. Do we use RECs? That's the, why I talk about RECs. I mean, does Monterey Bay Community Power use it? I mean, if they're so bad, do you use them? And if you don't, or if you do, then why?
If you mean by regs, either type 2 or type 3.
Yes, that seems to be the value.
We do not buy either. We only
Okay.
buy PCC one and we buy large hydro. That's it.
Okay, so we don't have the
So
the
the
ones that are
answer
bad.
is no?
Not to 2 or 3.
For PCC 2 and PCC 3,
Okay.
we do not buy either one.
Okay.
We have not bought a single kilowatt hour. We buy
And all this is my personal philosophical thing. Most of us, a lot of us are here. We're wearing these buttons. It's not about individual. I'm not worried about lowering my rate. I'm not worried about it personally. We as a community, as a society, we were hit on this. We got a bigger commitment here. And I believe Kim was talking about it. You know, yeah, because it's all built. Renewable stuff is built. The way you get more though, okay, maybe it's the shell unit first, but the way you get more is you increase demand for renewables. If there's more demand, they're going to build more renewables. That's the goal. The goal here is we've got to reduce it. I'm gonna be dead. You know, I'm still teaching now that I'm retired. I tell my kids every year, like, I'm not gonna deal with it. I'm gonna be gone, you know, but you guys, they're gonna have to deal with it. Our kids, our grandkids are gonna be left with the mess that we've made. It's not just about us. It's not just about what we pay each month. I like your Monterey Bay Prime. That's a great option. I'll pay that extra penny a kilowatt. I like the way you told me exactly what it was. Penny a kilowatt. I'll take it. Anyway, thank you.
Gary, I'm curious, you guys joined the Solar Trust?
Not yet. We haven't had
We're
this.
waiting.
Yeah, we're kind of waiting.
Join Monterey Bay
We're hoping
Power.
that, yeah, we're kind of waiting to see how those plays out. But
We pulled the trigger on Solar Choice at the
Yeah.
first pending this stuff, and I encourage it. We're 100% sold. So, let me turn it over, Jim, I think you have a
Did
response.
have just a comment on demand is going to get stuff built. I agree with you. Generally speaking, the problem that we have in the market now is all of the consumers, the generations, the line item on your electric bill, generation, that's what's driving. Those are the guys, wherever that load is, those are the collective that drive new construction. The utilities, the IOUs, are losing enough customers now to the CCAs, and I guess the DAs to a certain extent, direct access, that the utilities now are pushing back and saying, we're done, we don't have to build anymore, our load is shrinking, we have enough renewables out there, we're good to go. So the Utilities Commission, Public Utility Commission, published that thing I call the Green Book. I refer to it very quickly. And the Green Book is an alarm to the public that says, hey guys, nobody's building new generation to the degree that we need it built. So there is demand, but there's no capital. Hang on, let me finish.
Gary, I got this.
There isn't any capital in the CCAs to the extent that it's needed to get these things built to the scale that they're needed.
Thank you. 1 second, sorry.
Just 2 points to refute what I've just heard. One, by generation moving from PG&E to CCAs, you're not increasing load. So at least there's a logical conclusion that says you really don't have to build new resources. But that's not what's going on. So far, in the last 3 years alone, the CCAs in California, in Northern California and Southern California, are contracting for 1 gigawatt hours of new renewable resources. Solar, wind, all over California.
you're building you said you're contracted,
We get
you're
contracts.
building.
We have developers building it, and we are
Right.
signing a PPA with those developers.
Right, so you're not going out paying for something that's already there, this is.
That is
new.
correct, it's brand new.
Let me make sure I
Brand new
understand this. So this is really important, right? So this California-wide, the CCAs are moving forward with building 1 gigawatt
Which is
new-
1,000 megawatts, which is 1 million kilowatts.
Right.
So,
of new renewable
of new renewable resources right here in California.
Awesome.
And actually, we'll get some in New Mexico as well. It's directly connected to California.
Online when?
Mostly would be coming in, some are coming in 2019, some will be coming in 2020. And the ones that we are contracting for and about to contract for will be coming in around 2021.
Something that, we talk about renewables, and something you really, it's just not the renewable component, it's also, it's a whole package in the sense of renewable, storage, demand response, distributed energy resources. There's a whole discussion that needs to take place. The challenge that you have with renewables, obviously when you don't know when it's going to be windy, so I mean, that's a not known factor. Obviously, we live in California, maybe not today, but generally it's sunny. So you have generation during the day. The issue that the ISO is having now is that you have, which is referred to the duck curve, where basically you have so much renewable energy online during the day, the power prices are excessively low. But then, once the sun goes down, then there's a ramp period where everybody, I mean, people's consumption load still exists in the wee hours of the morning and at 5 and 6 o'clock when it starts getting dark. So you have to get that energy from somewhere. And unless you have storage supporting with that, which there, and storage, it's, again, another discussion.
Right.
And I'm not advocating, either Pilot is active in that market or Monterey Bay. I'm just basically saying when you talk about renewables, you have to look at the whole picture and just be very,
Right. Flywheels, other water up and tires that come down at night, I mean, all that, there's also ideas for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
You're right, that's all part of it,
it's
yeah.
all part of the package, and I guess I just want to make sure that everybody's clear. Just because you put a solar field in, doesn't mean you have electricity at,
Yeah.
7 o'clock at night, when you are turning, you're watching your TV, doing all the stuff that you want to do. I don't know.
Yes, sir.
You
Let me,
know,
sir, just to make sure, anybody else have a question that hasn't spoken yet?
I actually have a question.
Okay.
Have a- There's some, on the risk analysis, there was some debate over rate changes. At this point, we can have a rate change from PG&E, correct?
Through a rate case.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They
You
can
just
they
can't
can jack
change
up the
those
rates, they can jack up their own rates. You guys might have to pilot
Kansas City.
King City, sorry. You're here, so I keep saying pilot. King City, if there's an issue with the amount of energy they're using or we're using, whatever, the rates can go up because supply and demand.
Every CCA has that problem.
It's how it works across the board.
And let me give you an example. I mean, so, Marin, that was the initial CCA, they entered into a long-term agreement, and basically power prices went down. So basically the consumers, they were locked into a higher rate. And the concern at the time was that their customers potentially would be paying higher than the utility was at the time. So,
But the thing about that is, basically, my question is there any way of getting any sort of, outside of producing your own power and storing your own power, is there any way that, there's no silver bullet or magic word to use that would say, your rates are not going to go up, your rates are not going to go down?
Can I make one, especially on the point that your rates are not going up or down? We actually offered our customers from the start, if they wanted to, we can fix the rates if they want for up to 3 years, and just keep it at that level, especially if that's offer being made for the commercial customers. And on top of that, we'll give them 2% discount for PG&E's rates. We also made them an offer that if they want, we'll make sure that the rates will never go above PG&E for up to 5 years. So we'll have a contract with them that says, no matter what PG&E's rates will go, we'll be right there. And in return, you can give us half the rebate that we intend to give you year in and year out. Going back to the point that you made, which is how do you mitigate risk? Bottom line is PG&E can raise the rates, so it's King City, Marin, anyway. I think the best way to mitigate rate fluctuations is to hold some money in reserves, to keep some money in the piggy bank, so to speak.
That's a different form of storage, but it's still storage.
Exactly. It's stored, and to that respect, I mean, from day one, whether that's Silicon Valley, because I started over there, or here at Monterey Bay, I have promoted and I've got a lot of meeting for it, but I've promoted that we keep reserves and we put as much money in the first 2 years in reserves as we possibly can, so we can have that leverage, so we can mitigate rate increases, we can deal with any problems, because we can have 50% of our operating expense, and based on our financial performance, we're going to be able to get there in about 2.5 years. Now, here's the best part about this, for you, actually. You're going to come in at 2020, and by then, we are about a year and a half into operation. By then, we'll probably be looking at roughly about maybe $60 to $70 million in reserves. You get the benefit of having that reserves to mitigate your rates and whatever issues that will come in the future without having to contribute anything to it. And by the way, just to be clear, to the extent that you want to join us, all it costs you is a resolution. That's it.
Thank you.
Could I just follow up on that?
Let me, hold on, there
Oh,
was somebody that hadn't spoken.
Oh.
Sorry, I asked random things, but,
What are, for anybody, what are the current storage capabilities and planned future storage capabilities of power?
I mean, as I mentioned, King City is already exploring the possibility of establishing a 3 to 5 megawatt facility on their
Storage, not generating. I'm talking about
generation.
storage.
But when you do generation,
You're also using storage.
you want to do storage as well.
Okay.
So I mean,
You're not at the same time.
So you're not throwing it out the window.
well, it goes into the system, and I guess the worst thing is you want really that energy to be sold on the the market, and it potentially could go to other states. I mean, that's how the California MSO works. But our conversation with them is, you look at an entire package and not just be focused on the solar component. It's also a storage, demand response. I mean, there's a whole behavioral change that needs to happen for the consumers as well to basically mitigate some of your consumption.
For us, when we went out for an RFO for solar or renewable resources, we said, do not give us just solar. If it doesn't come with storage, we don't want it. So you often need to have storage to go solar. And so we are a few weeks away from signing 2 agreements for 300 megawatt of solar, 90 megawatt of storage. That 90 megawatt of storage will get 45% of that. Silicon Valley gets the other 55%. That's about 40 and a half megawatt of storage. And that's considerably more than what the CPUC basically tells us we need to do. They basically ask for 1% of storage, and that comes to about 6 megawatt. We're going to have 40 megawatt, and we're not going to stop. We're going to do a lot of it locally as well. We do have another RFO that just went out today for 20 megawatt of local generation for solar systems plus storage. That would be in the range of 1 to 3 megawatt.
Thank you.
Allison?
I think this is really for Pilot Power. Can you talk a little bit about the high percentage that you have had historically with unidentifiable sources and how that fits in with your help of King City?
Okay, so that is Pilot Power. So Pilot Power doesn't just have King City. We have a whole book of customers who are in the direct access.
Is this your first CCA?
This is our first CCA,
Okay.
yes. So we have a book of customers, we've been in operation since 2001. We have a book of customers. They tell us how they want their procurement to be. So if we have to maintain the RPS requirement outlined by the state, if they basically want to take system power, that is going to be the system power component. That is our customers, not King City, our customers' desire and obligation. We are, as an energy service provider, we are obligated to fulfill their needs. King City will have its own content label, which is what you're referring to, that is King City specific. And that label is going to look very different than Pilot's content label. So, I mean, again, we keep on bringing Pilot into the mix. We are, pardon me?
You're weird.
No, but I understand that, I mean, let's be honest, I mean, Monterey Bay has hired GridX. They're a for-profit company. They're managing their call center and data management. They're going to have to hire, an energy service provider to do procurement and so on and so forth. So, I mean, they're just not here. I'm here to represent King City, and I'm just basically saying that's why I'm trying to bifurcate. What is happening with Pilot doesn't mean it's happening in King City. And I just want to be very kind of crystal clear because everybody's trying to mash this together.
Gary, I just have synapse fire. And earlier you made a comment about a solar generation plant.
Well, they mentioned something about.
Yeah, I think you're talking about
Mentioned
King City. I think you're talking about the comment that.
No, I know King City's building one. I thought
Right.
someone said that we were not building one. Okay, then I misheard that. That's what I was,
Okay.
that's why I'm like,
All right, so
I was like, you're trying to build one?
Yeah.
I'd love for us to.
According to Kim, it was a long time
It's
ago.
probably been 5 years since they talked about putting something like that up on Fort Ord. And
Okay,
it was
all right.
kind of like a, let's try this, and then
Okay.
it never really went.
I misheard
So
that. I knew about
that's,
King
I
City.
think where that came from.
Okay, that was probably
Yeah.
just me.
No worries.
Part of that 25 years of carrying the.
I'm Diane. I have a question. Does this power grid and the power sources, is nuclear power considered clean energy?
Who first?
There's no definition for clean energy. It is considered to be carbon-free, but it's not renewable because you do have to burn something.
It's very dangerous. So both of you use that, or?
We don't buy nuclear. We actually specified in our RFOs that the supplier cannot give us power that's coming out of nuclear power.
And we don't contract for nuclear as well, albeit, I mean, there's system power. I mean, the conversation earlier was, all that water going in the pool, you can't differentiate, that electron from solar to nuclear to coal to whatever. It's all in the pool. You're just pulling from that pool. That's just that's how the system works. The only way you can, solidly know that you have green energy coming into your home is you have a rooftop solar facility on your,
Yes.
so you know.
And the battery. And the battery.
You want to use it at night?
I mean, you ultimately you do, but I mean,
Yeah.
yes, but I mean,
Let me give Jim a chance here to, you kind of taking some notes along the way. Any commentary along at this point?
No, I'm enjoying the.
Wonderful. All right, let me go, 1 second. Rolf, then Allison, and then Alex. Gotcha.
A question for John or Jim. How much money, taxpayer money approximately is spent in California to subsidize solar energy production from including local, county, state, and federal? And when you include that, is solar really cheaper to produce,
Yeah,
provide
so-
than fossil
So
fuel?
first of all, great answer, a great question. My answer is I don't know. If somebody here does, let them jump in. That's a great question. But here is something to consider. You have solar, and I forgot, there are 2 tax credits are out there. There's one for wind and there's one for solar. And those are both, I think, still in play in terms of are they going to be renewed or are they going away or not. If they go away, that'll have a marked impact on these capitalists who build these things and then say, I need my money. And part of my return is they're factoring in what their tax credits are. But I don't know what the dollar amount is if somebody else.
So part of a risk factor would be the uncertainty in the amount of subsidy that's provided to generate those types
Yeah,
of
I mean,
power.
like,
This is a question that I used to, when I was building power plants, this question always came up, and this is how it was responded to, is that 3 years ago, the snapshot in time was that, like you said, wind has a production tax credit and solar has an investment tax credit. The production is you get a tax on the production, you get a tax credit for how many gigawatt hours you produce, and on the investment, it's how much your capital you actually put in. So I was mostly on the solar side, and the investment tax, and there was only one tax credit. There were right after the crash, there was some DOE funding that was out there that were loan guarantees, so it was cheap money that you could go into, but that expired about 2010. So the only tax credit that's out there for solar right now is investment tax credit, and it represents about 30% of the total capex that goes in, and that's factored into the PPA price, and that was done. I mean, to me, this is good government, right? This is the government wanting to spur the development of renewable energies, and so they realized that they needed to help offset some of the costs so that we could reduce the overall PPA price to the customers. That is going to be going away. It sunsets in, I believe, 2030, I think, and it continues to ramp down. It's already ramped down, and right after the election, there was a risk that it was basically going to go away altogether. And what happened was not a crash in the solar market, or at least in PPA pricing, is that the manufacturers, we just went back, as an industry, went back and started to basically look for economies in the overall market. And things happen quicker in the solar industry than they have in others. I mean, this idea of subsidizing a nascent industry until it gets to its feet and it can support itself is not unusual. We do this all the time. In solar, it happened even faster. In that when the risk of the investment tax credit went away, all the economies of scale that were built or that happened because we ramped up so fast came into play. And solar is still cheaper, and I would love to know what your PPA price, but the last PPA price that I struck was in the 40s, $40 per megawatt hour.
Bit too much.
Okay. That's what I sold it at.
All right, 1 second.
No, I sold it at.
Allison, please.
So two-pronged question. So could you answer, will you be using RECs for King City or anticipated using RECs?
Category 3, or assuming category 2,
Bad
category
ones. 2 and 3s.
2 and 3. So we have category 2 in the mix right now.
Okay.
No category 3, and then category 1, obviously.
And then kind of addressing Jim, what I took out of your kind of some of the largest concerns were the use of RECs. I also heard the number of pages in board packet. I read the council packets every month, and they're constantly over 100 pages. But the big thing, and especially for our city council, are the agreements, right? So the JPA, contracts, things like that. Perhaps Alex and Dino can chime in and the two of you about, there was obviously an issue with Monterey Bay and the city. Has that been addressed? Can it be addressed? How does a contract differ?
Just to, JPA really stands for Joint Powers Agreement. It's an agreement, it's a contract. It just basically defines the rights and obligations of the members that join up together. There is a firewall between the JPA's credits and obligations and the cities. If we go belly up for whatever the reason is, that doesn't dispel back at you unless we go out there and bond and build stuff and have obligations that goes on for an extended period of time. If we continue to write PPAs or larger participation agreement if we contract for the power that will buy, whether on the short term or the long term, and something happened with the agency, the creditors can come after the cities.
Great.
Well, but there is guarantees that have been written by the counties and the cities. So the veil has been pierced.
That's
just
right.
having a guarantee.
We have, after 2 months of operation, we not only can pay off the bank loan that we borrowed in order to get us to this point, we can pay off the county of Santa Cruz and put in $550,000 to get us to this point, and we still have a couple of $1 million in the bank. And that's only 2 months of operation.
So then the guarantees go back to the city.
The guarantees retire, they go west.
So I have a comment for you. You heard Tom talk about the financial firewall. And Dennis, he had his comment on it too. The financial firewall, I think, for the CCA presentations that I've seen, and certainly municipalities in Marin County, is very attractive. I would say seductive, in that they hear that it protects the general funds, that there's no way anybody's computers can get through, which is not entirely true. If you read if a lawyer reads the legal brief on establishing these things, it's loaded with places where, well, this could happen here, but we don't think it will. And so in Marin County, when this thing happened, we had our forefather, who's now passed away, a guy named Charles McGlashan, and he said, these financial firewalls are a no fatal flaws document, and it is not. So here's the problem I have with the financial firewalls. I think they're great, and I think that they afford a certain amount of protection, but municipalities they truly do not have the expertise to look at a joint powers authority agreement and say, okay, we're going to be insulated, sort of, hopefully nobody pierces it, on the firewall. But they don't think about, okay, so forgetting about the whole JPA leaves, if just one member of the JPA wants to leave, that firewall doesn't do anything for him, or for that city or town. It's gone. You're on your own. So if the whole JPA goes belly up, you're good. Anything else beyond that, you're on your own.
I'm sorry, tied to that, as we're talking about JPAs, the city is part of many JPAs, right? How is this different? Liability wise. Yeah, I mean, we're constantly in JPAs all the time. How is this one particularly different as far as the liability?
Well, so they're not all the same, and all the agreements are different. So it's frankly not a simple answer, unfortunately. Alex, do you care to weigh in?
JPAs a lot of times spell out what the liabilities are, and they can be different. There's a default. Tom, when you said that it's an agreement, is this not a separate legal entity?
You mean the JPA?
Your CCA?
Yes.
It's a separate legal entity. So when you said it's an agreement between the people, between the parties, that's correct, but it created a separate legal entity.
Yes.
Right, because there's more than one way the JPA can happen. Dennis, for you, you're in a contractual relationship with King City, is that right?
Correct.
Only.
Correct.
King City purchases from you for 5 years.
Correct.
If they do not, what does that contract provide?
If they don't purchase from us?
If after 3.5 years it goes belly up, there's no more interest, what is the obligation of King City at that point?
So we have, and obviously this is a concern for city council, and we've talked about it. That is why we basically we do have milestones that they have an opportunity to exercise. And we made it very clear, again, we're not forcing King City to get into this relationship. This is their choice. But we want them to be comfortable with what they're doing, and so we've structured the transaction to basically say, there's a milestone, do you want to continue? And honestly, as we're approaching that milestone, we are not going to be hedging beyond that period. There's going to be plenty of conversations ahead of that milestone to make sure, hey, is this going to be an ongoing relationship, or you guys want to pull the plug on it now? And if we do, if they elect to pull the plug and step out of it, we liquidate contracts, we monetize what we have, and basically collapse the CCA. Pilot is taking a significant amount of risk in getting in that
King
transaction.
City sought pilot out.
Yes, absolutely. I want to make that crystal clear to everybody in this room that call came
But
from
you're King City,
Arizona.
aren't you? No, shit.
No.
So King City's risk exposure is the four corners of that contract. There's no tort liability exposure to King City. It is the four corners of that contract. And you say within that contract, there are milestones and sort of exit ramps.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just a
In our contract, I'm sorry, just to highlight, so a contract, were council to decide to move forward with King City, there would be a contract between King City and Delray Oaks.
Just a question to Paula, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but to the extent that Delray Oaks or King City need to meet an obligation for a long-term contract for over 10 years, by 2021,
We're the LS, we are the energy service provider. That is our business model. We already have that problem. That's not a CCA risk, that's a DA risk that we have. We are in that game already. We made the decision. We've been in this since 2001. We are in this business for the long haul. So, I mean, we already have the 10-year issue with our current customer base. King City, honestly, is the size of a small DA customer for us. It is not, we deal with large corporations. And so, honestly, you know, if King City elects to step away from the agreement, which we would hate for that to happen, but you know, that's the risk that we bear. Our customers, every time, we have customers now that are in a state of evergreen, they could just give us the notice period and say, we're no longer interested. That's just the business we're in. We're already accustomed to that.
so you will meet the obligations for the 10 years,
That's,
and it's okay if they decide to leave.
yeah, we don't tie King City or Delray Oaks to the 10-year agreement that we have. That is tied with Pilot.
You have plenty of
And our
places to put that energy.
Pardon me?
You have plenty of places to put that energy.
Yeah, well, we're active in the wholesale market, so I mean, that is the business we're in.
Thank you. Sir?
So, you know, if Delray Oaks chooses to go the King City route, and you said we're in an agreement with King City, what happens if King City wants out of Pilot and we don't? But we're tied to them, and we have to go with them, because that's how that works? Or are you thinking of contracting with Pilot directly?
So at this point in and we're figuring this out now. So at this point in the discussion, it is an agreement. It's actually an amendment to the agreement between Pilot and King City that brings us into the fold and gives us
Access to their,
access to that CCA. We become part of that CCA, but then it's going to have all of the protections and clauses, or I won't recommend the council to sign it, the council shouldn't, that will allow us to reasonably mitigate all of those risk factors. What if King City wants? What if we want one? What if the market goes crazy, right? All of that, and to use Alex's terms, will be described on the four corners of that contract, evaluated by the city attorney, brought before the council if that's the direction we decide to go.
So everything has risks. I mean,
Yeah.
everything has risks.
Everything has risk.
And getting back to what I mentioned earlier, we were told multiple times by the mayor that Monterey Bay Community Power was an existential threat to Delray Oaks. Never really explained why. I mean, I don't understand, and I understand that a small city might not understand this, but Silicon Valley, San Francisco, I mean, these people can't afford lawyers that can comb through this and figure it out. It's hard to understand what they're missing and what we figured out and everyone else
So
is
can I,
missed. But
can I?
yeah, please.
So what happened at Marin, for instance? They launched, there were a handful of the municipalities there that joined, and then a handful that held out, that didn't want to be in it. Cities that they made it to the past, and they had various things like, I can't remember the terminology, but it was basic marketing of, hey, if you join now, you don't have no fee to join type stuff. And it was, come on, I mean, you know, if you join today, I'll give you a 10% discount. Sure. It was just marketing. But what happened was they brought in consultants who understood CCAs, and now it turns out are actually writing business plans for CCAs at other launching CCAs. You look at it, this is not so clean, but okay, back then it was. And these consultants advised, and there were people on the board, Board of 5 or Board of 7, they voted right then. There were no lawyers who looked at any JPA agreements. It was all based upon that they would ask one of the city attorneys, what are your thoughts, or, do you have any issues here? But that process was very heavily driven by consultants making presentations to the board, and the board voted right there to join.
Well, I get it, and Brent was first, and you stand up anything, I've stood up new commands, and they're always a mess, it's a learning thing, but that was, 10 years ago. I still want to know why Monterey Bay Community Power an existential threat to Del Rio. If it is, explain it to me. I'm not
the one who came.
No, that's more for us. No, that's more for our city council. I mean, they sit in this room more than once and said it was the joining Monterey Bay Community Power was an existential threat to Del Rio. Someone explain it to me, that's all.
The results usually should say something. And results so far, in 8 years, we went from Marin
To Wild West.
to Wild West,
Yeah, sorry.
Marin, and in 2016, there were only 4 CCAs. Peninsula joined in, then followed by Silicon Valley. Today, by the end of 2018, there will be 19 of them.
Yeah, so there's 12 more this year, yeah.
And with the expectation that PG&E and Pacific Gas and Southern California Edison and now San Diego are all saying, okay, we give up. We just don't want to be in that market anymore. We're going to let it go, and we're going to focus on the wires because we figured something out. The cities, the counties, the communities got together and decided, I think we can work together in order to make this thing happen and make it happen well for us. And because of it, almost 40% of all the power that's being served in California today, actually more than 40%, is all served by either CCAs or in some cases DAs. And PG&E is predicting that 80% of the power that they are serving by 2025 would be all gone to CCAs. That, to me, is results. And that pretty much should be in the back of your heads as you make a decision as to what you want to do.
I have just a footnote.
Okay.
There probably will be a lot of people who join, but I think it also would be interesting to have had a parallel existence to see what would have happened if the market, the CCA market, did not have the opt-out mechanism. That's been a huge, unbelievably big. And in 2016, there was AB 2145 that went to Sacramento to try to change opt-out to opt-in. And there was it was,
Well, it's probably a policy thing. If you want it to succeed, you build it that way. It's like you were saying, that's public policy.
But my comment is, it may be successful, but a lot of the success is predicated or based upon that mechanism.
Yeah, but as a community, you decide what your priorities are. If you want to push, renewable energy, then you make a policy choice, and like a tax credit, or it's policy. That's a government.
Yeah, AB 117, which gave birth to CCA,
sorry,
was not renewable energy.
Let me keep, I know we've had you here for over 2 hours, everybody, let me start to try to wrap this up, and I'm happy to stay as long as you like.
Great.
Rolf?
Well, yeah, that was my question. How, about the automatic opt-in thing, how in the world did that get arranged? It's a huge perk for any kind of business to get such an arrangement. And if Del Rio ever does anything like this, I hoped that it would be that if you want to do it, then you make a choice to do it. You're not automatically enrolled in something different.
So
that goes
the
the other way.
opt-out was part of AB 117, which gave birth to CCAs. It is a very, very small part of 117. When you read it, it's like you almost miss it. Keep this in mind, you guys. If we use that as a precedent, and I focused on, in this case, eminent domain. Eminent domain is the same thing in these JPA agreements. It's a little nothing. Nobody pays attention. Now that document is going to live into perpetuity unless it gets changed. And at some point, if that eminent domain gets implemented, I'm going to be thinking, and hopefully people, if they remember what I'm saying, will think about, AB 117 had that little thing that said, opt out, and nobody thought about it. Well, look what today, it's just hugely central. You want to see how central? Go to Sacramento, try to change the law.
I think any business that had an automatic opt-in would succeed.
So I'm just cautioning you that eminent domain or those types of clauses in these JPA agreements, not just in Monterey, but everywhere, at some point,
You should all know that PG&E has the biggest eminent domain rights in the country, along with the railroad track people. And those are the ones that really take advantage of it because they need it in order to put wires and to put conduits underground. We don't put wires, we don't put any conduits underground. I don't know where that eminent domain came in, at least if it ever came, if it's in the JPA, I guarantee you we'll be the first one to go if I have the opportunity to revise this JPA. I don't need to build or have eminent domain on any piece of property in anybody's backyard in order to get generation. All I have to do is just find somebody who's willing to lease a piece of land and put a generator on it, hook it up to the grid, and I'm done.
The opt-out or the opt-in, I mean, the opt-in model was established up in the Northeast. In the Chicago area, it didn't go over very well because the reality is you have a decision here, today, or not this very second, but I mean, about either which CCA to join or do nothing. We have a room of maybe 25 people here. There's a lot of individuals in the community that are, they see their PG bill, they pay it faithfully, and don't really take notes. So I mean, the reality is that is the majority of the population. So having the basically complete, like everybody move into the program and then they basically have to step out if they choose to, really drives the success of why CCAs have been successful in California.
I just have a comment, PG&E does the same thing, you can't you're automatically opting into PG&E when you live in this area, so what's the problem? It's like we're already, people willy-nilly pay the PG&E bill because they get it and that's the only option.
Didn't say PG&E was perfect. I would never say that either.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So what is the percentage of people that have to opt out from a small city like this for it to not be reasonable, or for the business model not to work?
Not to work? I mean,
Not to work.
we forecast out 20%. And that was during, any feasibility study, that was sort of the stock, you assume 20%, does it still work? We tested them all to a 20%. We're forecasting, 10%. And
Opt out.
Opt out.
Okay.
And we're, we're well below that. So I mean, yes, there is going to be a threshold that you basically cross that basically says, when is it, not feasible to do this? 20% was sort of the benchmark percentage that you would use in any technical study. We've written technical studies, have done the modeling for it, and 20%, it still works. Yes, King City is not a large CCA, and clearly, Monterey Bay is gigantic in comparison. There is economies of scale in the sense of having large revenues and stuff like that, but the reality is that's why we are focused on ensuring that our costs are in check with the city. I kid you not, I have to get the city's permission to, there was an event that they had in their community, part of the Amgen program, KCCP had a table, we had our staff there, we basically wanted wristbands with the community choice. We basically got the city's permission to purchase those wristbands. We do not spend a dime without the city's approval. That's how cost sensitive we are trying to establish their program to be.
Can you tell us about how many accounts are in King City and how many are in Del Rio?
So King City, the initial count that went in is 3,817 accounts. Delray Oaks would be 850, 52.
850?
Okay.
And that includes
That's commercial and
residents
residential.
and?
Yes, that's total account. Those are
He said
meters.
about 3,000 residential, so it's about 8, so.
Yeah, that's meters.
Right.
We call them accounts.
Thank you.
On your opt-out, just something else. When a house changes, if it gets sold, or renter moves in, or the renters move, Every time that happens,
It goes back.
that meter goes to the CCA. So you can be with PG&E and opt out and say, I'm not doing this, and then you bring renters in, and they may not know, but as soon as that meter title changes, it goes to CCA.
So it has to be a purchase, not a renter.
No, it's whatever the meter changes, whatever the bill changes,
The meter.
it's whatever the bill changes.
So there's only count for that meter.
Got
I have a question actually that I was asked, I don't know the answer to, Tom, this is for Monterey Community Power. Is the Joint Powers Authority a PERS organization?
No, it is not.
Okay,
We don't intend to.
thank you. All right, any other questions? Yes.
I just wanted to provide some thoughts about the subsidies for the fossil fuel industry. We looked up the Energy Agency, $600 billion in 2013.
Right.
I think $600 billion were pumped in to subsidize the fossil fuel industry
In
in 2013. That was the last recorded record we have. So I can't quote on the renewable energy subsidies, but I can guarantee you it may be a couple percent of that at most. So if you're talking about a fighting chance between industries, I think you need to bring in the comparisons to kind of put them into place. And to kind of jump off what Tom was saying, there's been a lot of kind of back and forth about Marin and all disclosure. I used to work for MCE. I'm very proud of being a part of the first community choice energy. If this model didn't work, then 19 other regions across, the state of California wouldn't have tried to adopt it. And not only a private entity is getting in this business as well. So it shows you there's something to be said for this model, that it works. Whether, again, you are part of this whole new energy revolution that's going on.
And there's two private entities.
Yes.
So, King City is one, Solana Beach is the other.
Yep.
They're doing exactly the same structure. So, it is a small community, once again, and it goes back to, they are looking for something specific to their community. And that was the reason why King City did it, and that's the reason why Solana Beach did it. For different reasons, obviously, but there's two.
Yes, sir.
Bottom line is that there's degradation of the environment, something's going to have to change. Okay. I know there's a need, to make money, capitalism, I'm all for it. I would also like to see what is going to be the encouragement for private people and businesses to have their own solar panels, their own charging stations, encourage electric cars. Where is this going to come? Because this could spread and be big. And I know it's going to cut into a lot of other areas, people who are making a profit. But that's just my observation. I'd like to see some kind of balance as we move on between more private individuals start to do this and some not completely shutting down any money-making power, but just somehow we can maintain balance as this is progressing.
Well, I think King City is part of their program is investing back in the community and putting rooftop solar on underprivileged, and that's at no cost to those households. So, the cost that someone has to pay for, there's a lot of volunteer labor. We've committed as a company to volunteer our time, as well as we've actually contributed financial dollars to that program. But those are specific programs that they want to put into their community.
Well, with the present federal administration, I'm not sure, but we had substantial benefits for electric car program. Those look like they may disappear. So I'd like to see some type of encouragement, maybe from other areas, for this to continue. And that's all.
Thank you for that. And one of the advantages, frankly, that we are seeing so far with the potential of a partnership in King City is there would be a revenue stream coming directly to Delray Oaks that the council could use to promote the installation of solar panels or other energy programs. The decisions, that would be a wonderful discussion to have.
Yeah.
How we want to.
So how are you going to split them? I'm just curious, with 3, 4, 5%, assuming that's what we get, I assume we get something similar. How much that's going to the city and how much ends up coming back to residents? What do you envision as the split?
So with the
Because I read an article that King City
right.
he went to the pilot was, he did, instead of Monterey Bay, he wanted money from the city,
Right.
so they could, fill potholes, and okay. But it's like, kind of like taking money out of the residents' pockets in the city spending like tax, but it's okay if we talk about it. I guess, well, how do you envision the split? I mean,
So basically the split is a certain rate for our residents, right? Which will be below, albeit not very far below, right? But will be below PG&E.
okay,
And then there will be a stream of revenue that comes back to the city through this agreement.
okay.
And then that money gets allocated by your city council. At least the staff recommendation
Do you
would
have any
be,
idea what we're looking at?
we're looking at roughly in the $75,000.
Yeah, I mean,
$75,000 a year. Yeah, and so that, again, that could have a list of options for council to decide from, and those options could include promoting the installation of solar panels on homes, promoting other energy-saving measures in homes to drive down energy consumption, and again, that'd be a wonderful conversation to go with that.
So that opens up the conversation about who has decision-making powers over rates, over what is done. Our mayor is a known climate denier. I don't think he's the right person to be making alternative energy decisions. So can you address who makes the decisions?
For decisions for whom?
For rate.
For rate setting?
For rates, for purchasing, for energy mixes?
So, I mean, for us, we have conversation with the city as to what their strategy is, in the sense of rates. Do they want to reduce for their customers? Do they want to get programs? I mean, there's sort of this onslaught of questions that we have asked. And then we go through the rate analysis process because we basically are procuring energy to meet the needs for the city. And then basically we'll present a package to the city to basically approve. Now, if Delaware Oaks elects to join, they're going to have that conversation, not so much with us, but it's going to be with the folks at King City.
So it's the city councils that meet together?
Yes, it is the city's program. It's
Okay.
not our program. We're not dictating anything to anybody as to what they need to do.
So there's really no guarantee that our energy mix is going to remain at a certain level of renewable if the city councils are the ones that are deciding
They can change.
what the mix is.
Well, I mean,
And then therefore the cost.
you as individuals of the community obviously have a voice, I suspect, into that. And it's no different than what happens in King City.
Okay, thank you. Tom?
Oh, the decisions are made by the governing board, and we have two boards. One is the policy board, which is made up of elected officials, 11 of them, and they meet 3 to 4 times a year, decide on matters of policy, budgets, rates, and the operations board, which is made up of city managers and county officials, administrators, and they meet 8 times a year minimum, and they decide on everything else, the day-to-day stuff that we do. We also have an advisory board that made up of citizens of all walks of life from the 3 counties, and they would be pretty much our first gate to go through before we go to the operations board and the policy board to help us decide on what needs to be done.
Thank you.
Can I chime in?
Sure.
I mean, this is as a resident, but my concern, what I would recommend with the operating assumption I was working on is that either choices here came with this mechanism of a pool of funds to be used for something, and that something is to be defined. Was it NB Plus is a full reinvestment of the rebate into local projects and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, a number of the offers that we make, in addition to getting the carbon-free at 3% list for this year, and obviously that's going to grow over the next few years as we start pour money into reserves. We also offer a B share, so you can put the 3% or the 4%, whatever the rebate then finally we have the MD Prime, whereby you get 100% eligible renewable resources for an extra penny, and whatever money we get from that will help us buy additional renewable resources.
All right, Kate?
Yeah, I would like to have the opportunity to be able to participate in MPCON. And I'm asking you to please consider that. Maybe we can re-agendize that and discuss that more. But,
MB Prime specifically?
well,
That option.
that option, where the MB Prime is where it is 100% renewable, is that correct?
It's 100% eligible renewable, yes.
Yes.
It's another grant.
I do distinguish, by the way, between eligible renewable and renewable, because I consider hydro as well as everybody else.
Right.
And no matter what, to look at hydro as a renewable resource, it's just not eligible in accordance to the state as well.
Right, no, I understand. Thank you.
It's the same with King City, because they're looking at offering the complete, which is category 1.
Yeah, but it could change if the city council said,
But it changes here too, because you've got to realize you've got a committee of they're all elected individuals who are participating in the program. So it's, again, that can change as well.
Kate, let me jump in here, I'm sorry, really quickly, I'm sorry, let me just make sure I understand what you want.
can I
What
jump
you-
in and tell you?
What you want, I think, is the ability to have an option to have 100% renewable energy.
And
Is that
100% carbon free.
Okay, and did I hear,
Right, no, I understand, but just.
and did I hear correctly that both,
And PG&E, all three LLCs.
All three offer.
All three offer a 100% renewable product.
okay,
Okay,
And
so,
are those costs available online?
Yeah,
Or is that
yeah.
yours? Okay.
yeah, so I just want to be sure we get this
Okay.
framed
And they
correctly.
all three use nuclear energy from the grid.
Well, the solar it's 100% solar for PG&E, that I know.
Which is what the city's on right now.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, go
And
ahead.
For sourcing, sometimes we get confused when we talk about 100%, you're going to get 100% no nuclear. You are getting nuclear power into your house whether you like it or not, no matter where you live. If you're living in California, some of the Aggregation electricity is seeping into your house. So when we talk about 100% carbon free or 100% eligible renewable, or when we talk about any type of resource that you would buy and either pay for a little bit more or a little less, we're talking about sourcing that power, not what's going to go into your house. We're talking about we paid a little extra in order to buy power that doesn't have nuclear.
To add
So
more of that to.
We specify that
Yeah.
to our suppliers and say, that contract that you're going to give us will not be a contract that has the applicating power mixed into it, and they have to commit to that. And does that change the fact that you are getting nuclear power into your house? No, it doesn't. You're still getting nuclear power, electricity into your house. It just changed the fact that I'm not sourcing that electricity anymore, and if everybody does the same thing,
then we
eventually
can-
people
Eventually, we're
Right.
increasing demand.
Exactly.
Right.
The Aggregation is out of business.
And that's really the important thing, is that we're
Yes.
creating a market that desires that, and then there is a reason for those, for any kind of entity to provide more of that.
Exactly.
And that's what's really important to me. Okay, so that's what I want to be clear about.
Creating more demand.
Yes,
So,
but we're
right.
looking at not only the immediate problems that are, that we're facing right now, whether they're revenue or whatever, but we're looking at long-term, what is going on with the planet, what's going on with climate change, what can we do as consumers to help drive this in a manner that's going to help in some way the buildup of the impact of climate change.
Anyone else? Allison?
Always. Can you talk a little bit about net surplus rates? I have solar and I get nothing from PG&E right now. I know the MACP formula, but do you have those rates yet for
Yes.
PG&E?
So on the King City Community Power website,
Yeah.
for a NEM credit,
Yeah.
credit, so I mean, you would have that, and that goes, I mean, I think PG&E's credit right now is 2 cents or something like
It's
that.
avoided costs. How about the surplus? We have
Yeah.
surplus.
Sure.
I know
That
what
is-
they're metering is, but.
That is, we're paying, we will pay that to you if you have a surplus. If over the year you have a surplus,
Yeah.
you're putting into the system.
Yeah.
We'll, I mean, it's your choice, we'll cut you a check at 7 cents, in excess of 7 cents, or you can use it as a credit to your account. If it goes over a certain
Yeah.
threshold, we'll force you to take the check, 'cause we don't want to carry the liability.
All right, 2.5 hours.
One more question. And actually, it's not a question, it's a comment. We happen to have all this land out here at Four Doors. Would you guys be interested in doing a solar farm? We could make, huh?
What if you're a genius? That's exactly what to do.
Well,
Really?
I'm not a genius, I've just been doing my homework. Is that, how does that work? I mean, obviously, somebody has an option for that land right now, but, whether they did it or not, I mean, the city is always looking for a source of revenue, right? Is that something that either organization, and obviously there would need to be some storage, but is that a viable project for either of the CCAs?
Quite frankly, that's when the working with a large entity helps, because one, even this year, we're gonna have 2% of our revenue dedicated to programs. So we've got about $5 million that we're gonna be spending on programs. And we generally take those programs to where we can get penetration, right? So if we can get customer penetration in areas where there's plenty of land and it comes reasonably inexpensive, and we can put whatever it is that we want to put on it, whether it's battery storage or solar or a combination of the two, then it is where we go. Obviously, it's harder to take, for example, a lot of utility scale solar and go to Santa Cruz, the city of Santa Cruz, and say, well, we're here, where can we plot this stuff? Well, there's not a whole lot of land over there. So obviously, the likely places for us to go is South Monterey County, over here.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we could partner.
But and just keep in mind that if Delray Oaks comes in, and from my understanding, given the size of the city, in terms of revenue, you'll be contributing a little less than 1% of our total revenue, actually. Significant, probably 1/3 of 1%. The question is, do you have then the resources or the land or the ability to absorb a lot of the programs that we would like to eventually put in, and we're going to be looking for the places where we can maximize the benefit for the entire region. We're not just going in every city and say, well, you give us less than 1%, and therefore you only get less than 1% worth of programs. It depends on whether you can absorb the programs that we can offer. And that's eventually where we're going to go.
So, are you saying that, say, if Del Rey has land, even though we're a very small percentage of your organization, that we would be considered for something?
And of course, again, with programs, you always go where you can find that, where programs can land and find market. And if the market is here, then we come here. If the market is elsewhere, we go elsewhere. Elsewhere in the region. We don't go out of our service territory. We're not going to go to King City, not to
Wrong project, so I just. And I guess, and that's, again, the long-term strategy, regardless of it's King City, Monterey Bay, any CCA, is looking at projects and really providing value to the community. And, again, King City is looking at a small project in comparison of the scheme, but for King City, it's huge for them. I don't know the size of the land out here. The reality is, Monterey Bay is you've got 3 counties, everybody's going to be fighting for space, wants to have that value brought to their community. That's going to be a tough battle. I've seen the footprint of Del Rey Oaks. It's tiny, and I would assume that if you're going to do a large-scale project, that they're going to need a lot of money. City is specifically looking at doing a small solar field. And that project is to the benefit of the city, of King City, in trying to reduce their carbon footprint.
Also, the risk all falls on King City. It's certainly not gonna fall on Pilot.
What's the
size of the small, when you
Yeah,
say
that's a-
small?
There we go.
Sorry, John.
No, that's the question I was just gonna ask. What's the minimum size that MECP would consider?
Actually, I was talking about
just
King
some-
City, when you said.
3 to
it's
5
small.
megawatts.
3 to 5 megawatts, okay. And how many acres is that ish?
5 to 6 acres per megawatt, give or take.
Yeah, they have a specific field that they cannot do anything with.
Okay.
It is, according to people, perfect location for them to put a solar.
So it's about 30 acres. We have about 10 times that.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, but.
Yeah.
Well,
This
10
would be-
acres, just, for the size of it, absorbs about 50 megawatt worth of solar, if that's what you eventually choose to do. Generally, it's about 6 acres per, even sometimes less, so it's 5 to 6 acres per megawatt.
What about the,
Go ahead.
I'd like.
Last time, and we'll wrap it up.
What's the minimum size? What's the smallest size project you guys would consider?
We are right now have an RFO for a total of 20 megawatt, and we are asking, our preference is for the sizes to range between 1 to 3 megawatts, so we can have so many of them spread around like that.
Okay, that's good enough.
And to the extent that we get decent prices being bid, then we can go from there.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us.